We'll begin with the reflections on universal well-being. May I
abiding well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abiding well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings release from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action, and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and the results will be their homes. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs.
So this morning, I thought about sharing about what we're doing in the residential retreat on a topic that I think is very important in cultivation, which is how do we respond to conflict? And also have a story that I think illustrates the principle. So this comes from the book Say What You Mean by Oren Sofer, and he has a section in the book titled The Blame Game, which is the game of right and wrong, win or lose. You know, and when you're in a conflict, you try to win, or maybe you give up, or maybe you try to avoid it. And so I thought it might be interesting just to explore a little bit about what he says. So he says that our views, intentions, and experiences reinforce each other. Our views determine our intentions shape our experiences, and our experiences confirm our views. Shifting our view, therefore, can change our intentions and our experience. I think this is actually a very important principle, because sometimes we don't see it, but we're locked in a particular way of seeing the world, that then we create kind of a whole intentional energy, kind of a forward-moving direction, which creates experiences that reinforce that view. So he says, what is the view of the blame game? Win and lose. Right and wrong. Conflict is dangerous, a problem, something wrong. And others are seen as objects in relations to our needs, or what we're trying to do. So that's the view. You can think about it. How often are we in that mindset? Right? We're at work, or we're in a relationship with another person, and we want to get our way, and the other person's an obstacle to our life. So this way of coming at the world leads to certain intentions. So we get into a mindset of fighting, of demanding, or maybe we end up protecting, becoming defensive. Or we blame and judge. They're no good, or I'm no good. Or we coerce, manipulate, and control. We try to get the situation to fit how we want things to be. We call that climbing on conditions, right? Panyuan. What is our experience? fear, anxiety, anger, aggression, shutting down, freezing, judgment, rejection, disconnection, and alienation. And those experiences reinforce our views of win or lose, right and wrong. Conflict is dangerous, and others become objects in relations to our needs. I'll just maybe say I think this is really important to be aware of, because Jin Chuan Shi myself, it's interesting, it's amazing how many people who have a really solid spiritual practice, a really good hearts, and they come and share with us the difficulties in their lives. And it comes because of being trapped in this particular way of being in the world and not knowing there's another option. And so he writes that there's 4 kinds of conflict, what he calls it, 4 habitual ways of responding to conflict. First one, he calls conflict avoidance. That's probably my favorite. So there's a conflict. So what I try to avoid it. Somebody I find difficult, so I avoid them. Topic is difficult, so I avoid bringing it up. He's always kind of tiptoeing around an issue, right? I'm sure people have had that experience when, you have kind of resentment in your heart, or you have something that's just really not going well, and you just kind of, I'm just gonna, don't bring it up. It's too hard. I don't know what I'm gonna do if it blows up, right? So that's conflict avoidance. The second one he has is competitive confrontation. I'll just maybe say just aggression. Right? We have something show up, and I say, I'm gonna get my way. So I'm gonna force my view on the situation and make sure that my needs are taken care of. I get my way. Third kind of response is passivity. This is saying, okay, I don't matter here. I just give in. Whatever you want, I'll do it. And I just sometimes we use the word sacrifice ourselves. That's why I think the word sacrifice isn't so great for ourselves if we really think about it, if that's what we mean by sacrifice. I just give up my own needs and just allow the other person to do whatever they want. Because what that does is we actually stop listening to what's going on inside. We lose this inner sense of aliveness and integrity, and we just kind of become passive. The fourth one, he says, is passive aggression. Now that one's, I think, also a favorite, is when we're really upset, and so we make these kind of snide comments, but pretend everything's okay. Yeah, everything's fine. Yeah, fine, no problem. Yeah, everything's good. Except, and there's a kind of a barb in our phrases. And that's another way we respond. So what he points to is, how do we get out of this blame game? And I thought he had a very interesting way to kind of illustrate it, which is essentially, rather than focusing on right and wrong, we focus on what is the deeper need in people's hearts, and how can we be of service to that, including our own. So rather than playing the game of blame, we play the game of kindness, of compassion, of joy and equanimity. What we just chanted in the reflections on universal well-being. And so what becomes that worldview? So the views are win-win. I'm here to care for everyone. We both can win. I have to listen to you and hear really what's in your heart. And I need to determine how to skillfully share what's in my heart with you so that we can both win. Conflict is natural, a ground for learning. So rather than seeing conflict as dangerous and to be avoided at all costs, conflict becomes a place of growth. We share universal needs. We're all human. We all want to be happy. Others have inherent value. People no longer become objects in our lives. We actually treat them with respect. This includes ourselves. We can treat ourselves as objects too, trying to fulfill some spiritual ideal or some project, and we just kind of force ourselves to kind of do things, but we're not really deeply listening to ourselves. So this kind of game has certain intentions. We inquire, we listen, we care, we collaborate, we connect. And what are the experiences? I'll say this sense of friendship and safety, belonging, understanding and mutual respect, and oftentimes a sense of creativity and synergy. Because when we know both people's needs, we can be creative. So what will work? What can work here? So I'll just give a very brief story. Given the time. So recently when I was actually doing this class, at the end, I was sharing with the group that we were going to have the applications for people to join the trainee program. And I said, okay, we're going to give the afternoon for people to work on the application. At that moment, Jin Chuan Shi said, no. I think maybe they can think about it. And I was actually taken quite aback because at that morning, we talked with Jin Chuan Shi and we had discussed for a while about what we thought might be good for people to do in the afternoon. So I was kind of like, what, you want to change it at this point? What do you want to? So no, I really think that, it's their choice. They should think about it. And I wasn't quite sure how to respond. But I could see in my heart a kind of irritation arose. Kind of like this, and there's many other conditions I could see after I reflected on it. But a sense of irritation, like, we agreed on this and now you want to change it? Like, what do you want to do? And so it was actually quite striking because I could actually see that irritation didn't actually go away. I very quickly actually stayed in the heart for the day and even the next day. And I was just kind of observing, I was just kind of watching it, kind of observing, relaxing into it. And one of the exercises I gave at the end of the class was for people to see when do you know that you're playing the blame game? What happens in your body? What happens in your emotions and thoughts? And I could definitely see in my face has tension, right? A certain kind of knot in the chest, in the stomach, a kind of trying to find fault. Starting to go, why, and I'm just observing, gosh, interesting. But I played this game enough that the first move I usually do is, so I also ask everyone, so what methods do you use to deal with this? So the first thing was, don't add fuel to the fire. So I just try to relax, observe it, relax, observe it, relax. Don't look for a quick solution, because if I try to force myself to have a different state, it usually makes things worse. So just relax, observe. What's actually going on? What's actually going on in my heart? What's happening? And, I kind of stayed for a while. And then so I felt, okay. After it's been there for maybe a day and a half, I thought, okay, well, what do I usually do when something sticks around for so long? Because I haven't had that kind of tightness for quite a while. So I usually go and bow to Guanyin Bodhisattva. So in the morning, after morning chanting, I just stayed in the hall later. I went down the hall later, and I just bowed for a while. And then I recited the repentance verse that I always found very moving, which is Di Zi Zong Den Zong Yu Wu Si, which is saying that, as a disciple, from beginning of this time, I've created many offenses out of greed, hatred, and delusion, shed the Buddha's blood, was unfilial to my parents, I think even killed my parents. But there's this very heart-wrenching kind of repentance verse. but at the end saying, I really wish that the triple jewel of light will come into my heart and that I can return to my fundamental nature that's pure. The reason I use this repentance verse is because I find that sometimes if these kind of knots in my heart don't resolve themselves, there's some very deep unconscious patterns that are at work that I can't just use my conscious mind to try to resolve. I have to just actually kind of work at a deeper place. So after that, I sat for a little bit, and then I wrote in my journal about the experience. And then I tried to connect to the deeper needs. What are my deeper needs here? It was interesting enough. It took me a little time to kind of discover it. But when I really felt like, that was right. Two needs I felt was a need for support and a need to, need for support. I think it says a need for consistency. Those are the two. And still there was a sense of that knot in my heart. But it was interesting when I kind of was able to locate those needs from this place of caring for myself and open space after the practice, I could something in my heart go a little bit untied. And I won't go into the whole story, but later afternoon I had a chance also to have a chance to just talk with Jin Shi about it, to kind of share what's in my heart and also listen what's in his heart. And I say, well, how do we move from here? How do we come up with some creative ways to work together? And so I just thought of sharing that. It's just an illustration of how do we work with conflict when it arises. And I think it's actually important for each of us to think about it. That for sure we have our daily practices, but then we also go into the world and we meet other people. Or we might even meet situations where we see negative energy. How do we handle it? Or how do we take our cultivation into the world? And so this is just one practice I think is really important. Okay, so maybe just that much for this morning. And for those who are online, you can actually reflect a little bit. What's your conflict strategy, your habitual response? And what are